This presentation is How NAVSUP Fights. The presentation will discuss NAVSUP's contribution to Navy's Title X requirements to man, train, and equip our fleet. It will also discuss our value proposition towards overall naval readiness. So our Navy has a Title X requirement to man, train, and equip a fleet. We've also developed Readiness Kill Chain Doctrine, which enables us to maximize the utility of limited resources in order to generate and sustain readiness that's capable of addressing the increasing operational demands upon our fleet as adversaries continue to challenge our interests abroad. And NAVSUP is directly contributing to this Title X requirement. We do this through a family of Echelon 3 commands, who are laser-focused on providing tailor-supplied solutions that optimize Navy readiness. These commands include the Weapon Systems Support Command, whose mission is to optimize Navy supply chain; the Business Systems Center, whose mission is to manage supply chain IT systems; our Fleet Logistics Centers, 8 globally positioned logistics centers who are providing for the full range of military operations of our fleet; and finally, the Navy Exchange Command, who ensures access to quality of life services to our sailors, both at home and abroad. And this is what it looks like when it all comes together. NAVSUP is responsible for sustaining Navy supply wholeness. This supply wholeness becomes our responsibility once the weapon systems that the Navy fields crosses their material support date. A material support date is somewhat analogous to buying a new car. When you're buying the new car, and you're in the procurement phase, you can talk to the dealer about all the different features you want. However, once you finally buy the car and drive it off the lot, you become responsible for the sustainment of that vehicle throughout its life cycle. Similar process for a lot of our weapon systems. Once they cross the material support date, it becomes NAVSUP's responsibility to sustain the supply wholeness of all the secondary repair parts that those ships and planes need throughout their life cycle. But we do more than that. As a product support inventory control point, we're also working with program managers in the procurement phases to translate these supply requirements in order to make sure that we're not just supporting the design, but we're also helping to design the support. As we come around the corner, you'll see some of our NEXCOM missions. NEXCOM's responsible for providing the quality of life services to include lodging to our transient sailors. We've got the Business Systems Center, who supports Navy's logistics, transportation, and finance IT systems. And then right in the middle of this road is one of our core missions performed by the NAVSUP Weapon Systems Support. NAVSUP Weapon Systems Support's responsible for the procurement and repair of repairable components. They also work to build allowances that support Navy's operational industrial needs. And then they've got this other critical mission where they integrate supply support to create a holistic solution for Navy's total requirement by advocating on behalf of the Navy with our supply partners, GSA and DLA, to create a total supply solution and maximize readiness for our fleet. Continuing down the road, we've got our Fleet Assist teams at our Fleet Logistics Centers that provide essential crew training and support. And through our headquarters, we're managing policy and support for fuel, ammo, food, postal, and hazmat programs. As we get ready to deploy, our Fleet Logistics Centers again are critically engaged with providing logistics and husbanding services to our fleet to ensure they maintain that full range of military operations. And through our Weapon Systems Support Command, we also pre-position essential supplies abroad, aboard, and ashore to maximize readiness out in the fleet. As Chief of the Supply Corps, our commanding officer also leads a cadre of Supply Corps officers who provide shipboard logistics and crew service support. These are the warfighters that go out and take the products and services NAVSUP provides and uses them in the environment in which they create readiness for our fleet. In summary, NAVSUP optimizes Navy's end-to-end supply chain. Now that we've taken a look at our organization and seen how it's structured, and we've also looked at the products and services which we provide, we're now going to take a look at the enterprise through the lens of our financial resources to glean what it is we do to contribute to Navy's Title X requirement and ultimately provide readiness for our fleet. So in 2017, NAVSUP needed $8.4 billion in total resources to provide supply, service, quality of life support to the Navy and Joint Warfighter. Of the $8.4 billion, $7.8 billion of this came by way of Navy Working Capital Fund Contract Authority. Contract Authority differs from appropriated funds in that it's not actually funds given to you. Rather, it's the authority to obligate the government to a future payment. Of the $7.8 billion NAVSUP received in contract authority, $6.5 billion of that went specifically to the procurement and repair of material. That mission was largely executed by the Weapons Systems Support Command. NAVSUP also received $625 million in appropriated resources to cover the costs of the appropriated missions, which on the previous slide are largely represented on the outsides or corners of the roads. On the bottom of this slide, you can see how these resources are allocated across our enterprise, and they consist of OMIN, OMIN-R, OPN, RDT&E. These resources largely go to pay for labor, service-wide transportation. But let's take another look at our resources, this time from a different perspective. The first perspective is the Navy Working Capital Fund perspective. This is how Navy looks at NAVSUP and supply management. Supply management comprised 27% of the overall Navy Working Capital Fund portfolio in 2017. Of the $7.9 billion, almost all of it was executed by NAVSUP. This makes NAVSUP Navy's Working Capital Fund supply management activity. While our resources represent 27% of the overall Navy Working Capital Fund resources, that 27% to us represents 93% of our total resources. So let's take a closer look at the $7.8 billion in contract authority NAVSUP received in 2017 and look at how we execute that. Moving to the middle pie chart, you can see almost 3/4 of that, or $5.7 billion, went to the procurement or repair of wholesale material. Put differently, these are depot level repairables, aviation depot level repairables, and design unstable consumable items, which NAVSUP manages. See, NAVSUP is analogous to, let's say, Best Buy. Best Buy is someplace you may go to buy your high-end electronic component, and if that component breaks, don't throw it away, bring it back, and we'll repair it for pennies on the dollar. Moving around the pie chart, we hit the retail wedge, which is $781 million. This is a critical resource that we use to provide readiness to our fleet. These retail dollars represent NAVSUP using its contract authority to go out and buy GSA and DLA material to put it into our Navy inventories where we need it, in the quantities that we need it, to issue it to our fleet. So at this point, I'm going to go on a little tangent and talk about our supply partners and how we come together in order to create readiness for our fleet. I'll start with GSA. GSA's responsibility is to buy consumable items which are used throughout whole of government. Any department can use these. Think office supplies, cleaning supplies, items like this. Their business model is direct vendor delivery. So when you place an order in a specific quantity, they're going to place the order and then ship it directly to the customer. You have the Defense Logistics Agency. They too buy consumables. The difference is DLA buys consumable items which have unique military application. So think nuts, bolts, disposable circuit cards that relate to specific weapon systems. DLA's business model is somewhat analogous to Costco. Let's just use that as an example. You go to Costco, you can buy absolutely everything. You can buy gas, food, clothes, just about anything that you would need. And while this business model works very well for, let's say, a mom who might be trying to feed a small army, or DLA who's trying to feed an actual army, it doesn't necessarily work well for a Navy, which is a small unit organization that does decentralized operations on constant worldwide deployment. It's hard to land pallets on board submarines. So this $781 million enables NAVSUP to buy that material and pre-position it where our Navy needs, and if need be, break it down and sell it into individual packet sizes which match the allowances which we've provided to our fleet. But this isn't necessarily what we try to do at first. Think back to the bridge that we showed on the third slide. Our preferred solution is to be an advocate for the Navy and create a holistic solution with our GSA or DLA partners in order that they come up with a solution by which our customer, the Navy, can buy directly from them. Sometimes that can't happen because they have to buy according to some economic ordering quantity. Other times, the period it takes us to negotiate a solution requires that we provide some level of support or fill the gap when their supply chain unintentionally sub-optimizes support to our fleet. And that's what these resources enable us to do. They enable us to provide that solution and to fill that gap. The final wedge are our operations. This is the cost of us doing our business, which in 2017 was $1.2 billion. This largely goes to labor, warehousing, distribution, and overhead. Moving to the last pie chart, we break down our business by actual budget project code. This is a financial term that shows really where the money's being executed and what we're supporting with it. So on the far right, you'll see BP85. This is our aviation business. BP85 represents all the AVDLRs that NAVSUP WSS either procured or repaired in 2017 from the perspective of dollars. $4.5 billion went to the procurement and repair of AVDLRs, whereas $1.1 billion went to the procurement and repair of maritime DLRs. This is very interesting. This shows that really, in providing supply wholeness for the U.S. Navy, there's two separate businesses. We're not just supporting a fleet, we're also supporting a naval air force. And the problem sets that come with those are both very different. On the aviation side, you have a much more narrow range of NINs, which with far greater depth, because that demand is forecastable and it's reoccurring. An aircraft, similar to your car, requires maintenance after a certain amount of flying hours. Those flying hours are predictable and they're reliable, so we realize a lot of sales. Those sales are predictable. On the maritime side, it's the exact opposite problem set. We have an incredible amount of different platforms and weapon systems in our fleet, and the demand associated with those weapon systems is largely unpredictable. So we have a huge range of NINs with very little depth. To give you a sense of magnitude, NAVSUP WSS Maritime manages over 300,000 NINs, of which only 6,000 roughly have predictable demand. So NAVSUP's value proposition statement to readiness is that NAVSUP provides supply wholeness for Navy's weapon systems. Supply wholeness is one component of overall equipment readiness to our fleet. We are responsible for that mission once a weapon system is fielded and crosses its material support date. And it's through the Navy Working Capital Fund that NAVSUP has the resources it needs in order to provide that supply wholeness to Navy's weapon systems. But supply wholeness is only one component of equipment readiness, and it's important to have that conversation. The closer we get to the deck plates or the fleets where we have engineers and maintainers repairing our equipment, it's very common to hear them say, "I could get this weapon system fixed as long as I had the part." This creates sometimes a linear mindset that supply wholeness equals equipment readiness. But at our level, that's not the case. Supply wholeness is only one component of overall readiness. And overall equipment readiness begins with good systems engineering. With good systems engineering, we're able to determine an intended availability for that weapon system, an anticipated failure rate, to which we can design accurate provisioning. With that accurate provisioning, our maintenance partners are able to design adequate planning and capacity to provide maintenance over the life cycle of that weapon system. And we, NAVSUP, are able to provide the maximum amount of supply wholeness designed to support that weapon system throughout its life cycle. Furthermore, because NAVSUP's business is the repair of repairable material, we also have to work with our maintenance facilities to put those broken parts back into their maintenance pipeline in order to refurbish them and bring them back such that they're ready for issue again. All three of these have to come together to ensure we achieve adequate supply wholeness and equipment readiness for our fleet. So let's take a look at this process and how we resource it. NAVSUP buys lead time. It begins with NAVSUP receiving the contract authority that it needs to buy material in for the Navy a lead time in advance. So this lead time in advance, our customers are providing us with their demand signal or the parts that they'd like to buy. This signal is constrained by the amount of money that they're programming into their budgets a lead time away. It's similar to buying a home. A lot of us would like to buy as large a home as we possibly could, but find ourselves often constrained by what it is we pre-qualify for. So while we receive the requirement signal a lead time in advance from our customers, we're also looking to see what they're programming in their budget a lead time away to ensure they have the ability to buy out the material that NAVSUP is buying in a lead time in advance. With that contract authority, it's our NAVSUP Weapon System Support Command provides supply wholeness. This is when the part is on the shelf for our customer to come and buy. So from a financial perspective, here's how it might look. NAVSUP Weapon System Support Command uses its contract authority to begin the procurement process of a part. Once a commercial vendor delivers the material into our inventory, or a repair depot completes its repair and bills us, cash comes out of NAVSUP's account to pay for these parts, which are now capitalized in our inventory. And we try to time this with the fleet's buyout. So when the fleet shows up and pays cash for that part through, say, Omen dollars, their dollars replenish our cash account to ensure that we remain financially solvent. In execution, missed requirements only build and carry forward because naturally not everything works perfectly. Sometimes the requirement was inaccurate. Resources could be inadequate. There could be lack of qualified vendors, obsolescence issues, diminishing resources, and sometimes there's just insufficient repair capacity to handle all of the work that's being requested of our organic or commercial facilities. When this happens, we achieve something less than 85% supply material availability for our fleet. And it's our fleet supply officers and our fleet logistics centers that come together in order to minimize that gap and maximize readiness for our fleet in the year of execution. All right, so here's our final slide. Does the Navy buy from NAVSUP? And the answer is yes. In 2016, the Navy spent a little over $6 billion on NAVSUP repairable components and design unstable material. And that's compared to $4.9 billion on DLA's disposable supplies. What's interesting to note is of the $4.9 billion that were spent at DLA, $2.9 billion of that were bought by other Navy Working Capital Fund activities that were also working to provide readiness for our fleet a lead time in advance in accordance with their individual mission sets. But the largest customer within the Working Capital Fund was NAVSUP. And that's NAVSUP doing that integration piece. This was the retail material we discussed earlier. This is NAVSUP buying DLA material in order to pre-position it where the Navy needs it, or issue it to our fleet in the quantities which they need it. Put together, NAVSUP is procuring and managing repairable components for our naval weapon systems, and we're pre-positioning demand-based disposable supplies. This is how we provide supply wholeness for Navy weapon systems during their sustainment. This is NAVSUP's contribution, or greatest contribution, to Navy's Title X requirements to man, train, and equip a fleet. We provide supply wholeness, one component of equipment readiness, by procuring, repairing, and positioning Navy supplies and creating tailored supply solutions for Navy's total requirement. Thank you.